US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ruby Barlow and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. Iran offers to help facilitate dialogue between Afghanistan and Pakistan after Islamabad declares open war on the Taliban and launches airstrikes on Kabul following border clashes. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says Tehran stands ready to assist talks to reduce tensions and promote cooperation between the two neighbours. Hillary Clinton tells a congressional panel that she has no knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and calls for President Donald Trump to testify under oath about his past association with the financier. She testifies behind closed doors as Bill Clinton prepares to appear after both agree to comply with a subpoena from the Epstein investigation, while all deny wrongdoing. The United States and Iran progress in talks over Tehran's nuclear program, Oman says, but end hours of negotiations without a breakthrough amid a massive US military buildup and threat of possible strikes. Mediator Oman confirms both sides will resume discussions after capital-level consultations, with technical talks set for next week in Vienna following meetings in Switzerland. Ukrainian and US officials meet in Geneva for post-war reconstruction talks despite a deadlock with Russia, as Kyiv seeks to finalize key settlement details at a trilateral meeting next month. Top negotiator Rustem Umerov says participants speak with President Volodymyr Zelensky after the session, which follows a night of Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. Netflix says it will not raise its takeover offer for Warner Bros. Discovery, effectively ceding the media giant to a rival bid from Paramount Skydance. The streaming company says the deal is no longer financially attractive after Warner Bros. Discovery's board declares Paramount Skydance's proposal superior under its existing merger terms. A US official says at least 2 Americans are on a speedboat fired upon by Cuba's Coast Guard, leaving 1 dead and another injured off the island's northern coast. 4 people are killed and 11 wounded in Wednesday's incident, with officials saying others on board include a US K-1 visa holder and possible legal permanent residents. Denmark will hold a parliamentary election on March 24th, Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen announces, amid a surge in support over her stance against US pressure on Greenland. Frederiksen has rallied European leaders against President Donald Trump's renewed interest in annexing the Arctic island, with polls suggesting the dispute boosts her popularity despite domestic cost of living concerns. Britain's ruling Labour Party loses a key Manchester by-election to the left-wing Greens, with official results dealing a fresh blow to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Green candidate Hannah Spencer wins in Gorton and Denton with nearly 15,000 votes, as Labour falls to 3rd place, behind Reform UK in one of its traditional strongholds. And to our top story of the hour, Iran has offered to help facilitate dialogue to resolve the escalating conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This comes after Pakistan declared open war on the Taliban government and launched airstrikes on Kabul, following border clashes. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said in a post on X that the Islamic Republic of Iran is ready to provide any necessary assistance to encourage dialogue and improve understanding and cooperation between both countries. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that the next round of US brokered talks with Russia is likely to take place in Abu Dhabi in early March. This follows a meeting between senior US and Ukrainian officials in Geneva, where discussions focused on post-war reconstruction and efforts to end the ongoing conflict. Zelensky expressed hope that progress made in Geneva would pave the way for a direct meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian negotiator Rustem Umerov confirmed that the sides were finalizing economics and security issues, aiming to make the upcoming trilateral talks as substantive as possible. The US delegation included US President Donald Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. While past negotiations in Geneva and Abu Dhabi failed to reach breakthroughs, including on territorial disputes, both sides are working to align positions for the next phase of discussions. Let's listen into comments from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Я говорив сьогодні вже кілька разів з Рустемом Умєровим, Давидом Арахамією та з представниками президента Сполучених Штатів Америки Стівом Віткофом та Джаредом Кушнером. За підсумками сьогоднішніх їхніх зустрічей вже більше готовності до наступного тристороннього формату. Скоріш за все, зустріч наступна буде в Еміратах, буде саме в Абу-Дабі. Ми розраховуємо, що формат буде на початку
Now joining us live, we have Major General Sadakaji, who is a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. General Sadakaji, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, Ruby. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me for your show.
Good morning to you. Now, in your opinion, and we've seen in the past that territory has been a major sticking point in these negotiations, how do you think that they will come to a resolution about territory, particularly the Donetsk region, which seems to be a major priority for Russia?
Good morning. A very pertinent question you have raised, and what comes to my mind is that kind of a spectrum of activities are paramount in terms of short term, medium term, long term. And in case of short term, there is a need to contain the situation. Containment, when I say, what I mean is that there is mindless conflict, exchange of fire, trans-border exchange of fire must freeze, must come to an end. Until that happens, the innocent civilians on either side, in addition to the soldiers, will keep getting killed. And in order to do that, both sides, under some kind of understanding, with a high-end objective or some kind of an objective, has to set as a goalpost in the forthcoming trilateral meeting. One. After containment, I would say the containment process also must involve a process of pulling back from wherever they are. Kherson, I think they are about 57 kilometers away from Odessa and from the point of contact. And Donbass, Russia is hammering because they want that 10% of the land which is still under Ukraine. They want it because of its vantage domination. From there, you can fan out your forces to multiple cardinal directions, and Ukraine is not amenable to surrender that land. Instead, they are asking for the 20% land which is under occupation of Russia. This is a matter of political decision which is to be taken, and that could be put as a long-term goal. After containment, I would say how to counter. For countering the thing, I personally feel that the supply of military hardware and of finances must stop to be given to Ukraine, and that should be a clear signal to Russia to stop the ongoing exchange of fire, which they have been time to time resorting and destroying the infrastructure, assets, and the energy sector. And thereafter, contestation would involve neither competition nor any conflict. It would be a kind of a sideline objective. If push comes to shove, nothing works out, then Ukraine has to be supported to the hilt, because Russia, as of now, will not be amenable to any kind of reconciliation, because loss of or giving back this 20% of land back to Ukraine would be a kind of prohibitive geopolitical cost for Putin. He will not be reconciling. Now, coming to certain issues which are on the sideline of what I have just shared, first and foremost is the neutral status of Ukraine. That is cannot be compromised as far as the demand of Russia is concerned. Scaling down the strength of armed forces of Ukraine from 900,000 to 600,000, it is a doable option. And third and most important thing is that the ceding of land, which is the core issue. Ceding of land, neither Zelensky can do anything, nor anybody, neither America nor any of the interlocutors. It is the people of Ukraine who have to ratify in the parliament, because Zelensky doesn't have the status of technically and legally as a president. It has to be ratified in the parliament by the members of parliament. Only then it will see the light of the day. Now, is it doable? Is it, while desirability indicates that in the 21st century, sovereignty of and territorial integrity should become the central issue to respect each other's border, and therefore it is non-negotiable as far as Ukraine is concerned. Russia is actually hardened the stance. It is not prepared to forego this particular piece of land, the eastern flank of Donbass, and therefore some kind of a via media has to be worked out. It has to be one-on-one between the leadership, and we are hopeful and optimistic, despite all challenges, that things should be pushed ahead in a progressive, forward-looking effort to achieve lasting peace to this mindless conflict. Back to you, Ruby.
Now, Major General, how do you believe that the attacks affect the negotiations? As hours before the meeting in Geneva, Russia launched some 420 drones and 39 missiles at Ukraine. How do these affect the negotiations? Does it add a layer of difficulty, or is it a display of strength from Russia?
Without any doubt, they add a layer of difficulty and challenges. The way to handle it is, this is my loud thought, that there has to be some mechanism existing under a neutral force, under the flag of United Nations, call it joint team or whatever. There has to be exchange of teams, representatives of each other's countries' people, and they have to go to the point, be deployed at points from where the weapon platforms are being utilized or deployed. And they have to intervene. They have to have a finger on the command authority, command, control, coordination, surveillance, intelligence authority. It is only then some kind of effective control can be exercised, and such kind of unmindful exchange of fire can be prevented. Back to you, Ruby.
General Sadakaji, please don't go very far as we move to our next story, to the United States, where New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani has said he had a productive meeting with US President Donald Trump at the White House, discussing issues including housing and student detentions by federal immigration authorities. It was the second meeting between them since Mamdani's mayoral election win late last year. Mamdani said he raised concerns with Trump about the detention of Columbia University student Almina Agayeva from Azerbaijan by the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and that Trump later informed him she will be released imminently. The Federal Homeland Security Department subsequently said it freed Agayeva and launched removal proceedings against her. In their first meeting, Trump and Mamdani spoke about bringing down the price of housing. Making housing more affordable has been one of Trump's pledges ahead of the midterm elections in late 2026, as prices for housing remain significantly higher than they were a few years ago. Cost of living and affordability were also issues at the heart of Mamdani's mayoral victory. And now back to our guest, Major General Sadakaji, who is a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Major General, both of these leaders come from very different ideological backgrounds, and they have publicly clashed before, but they've been able to perhaps work together on some issues such as affordability, housing. How do you believe that these political incentives, like Trump's midterm strategy, Mamdani's city building agenda, how do they shape substantive policy negotiations versus just performative cooperation?
Yes, very interesting question. First and foremost, our viewers would do well to understand that Mamdani is a Democrat and Trump is a Republican. Now, in spite of all differences in opinion and outlook, the new mayor of New York has put his finger on the right issue. That's how he is actually won with thumping majority. The central concern of the inhabitants of New York City today is actually the housing. The housing rates are so high. In fact, the vendors and the contractors are finding it difficult to get the labor at a reasonable rate for construction activities, because Donald Trump has come down heavily on the immigration, and the Customs Department has come down very heavily on the illegal immigrants. The illegal immigrants are basically the worker class or the labor class who are not available to contribute towards the construction work. So what happens? What happens to the construction department or the construction people who are involved in the construction? when the workers are not available, how can you actually increase the number of housing projects? So that is the moot question which they have to mutually decide, and Donald Trump may have to scale down his countermeasures against the immigrants, number one. Number two, as far as the funding is concerned, New York City is known to have maximum kinds of taxation on the housing project, taxation, electricity, water, etc., etc. That can be taken care of by mutual agreement. But the fact remains that the people are finding it very difficult. Many people I have come across, I have met them also, they have started shifting their bases to London, to Europe, European countries, to Middle East, etc., because it is becoming highly unaffordable to stay in a city like New York today. So therefore, it would do well that some kind of a thought-through approach and countermeasure be applied, which is acceptable to Donald Trump and his dispensation, as also Mamdani. And third and last thing is that conversation and communication is of paramount importance. It's good that both the leaders, that is the mayor of New York and Donald Trump, they connect well with each other. Donald Trump, in fact, this is the silver lining as far as Donald Trump is concerned. He has understood. There is some cross-talking, Ruby. You may have to tell your technical section to, address the issue. Otherwise, during conversation, this technical conversation can divert the attention of the speaker. So what I'm coming to is that these two leaders, they have come to a common thread of each other's likes and dislikes. So both of them have come to a kind of a platform of convergence with regard to the needs of the people of New York. This is called as a kind of a bipartisan kind of a response matrix, and without any parochial leanings. And this is where is the silver lining of Donald Trump is concerned, regardless of the party affiliations. And I think in times ahead, both of them will be playing tango, and Mamdani will have a greater say and his viability as the new leader of the New York City. Back to you, Ruby.
Major General Sadakaji, thank you so much for joining us today. Pleasure to have you on the show. Now, moving to our next story, ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has asked a US federal judge to throw out the drug trafficking case against him, arguing that the US government has interfered with his defense. Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, who are jailed in New York and have pleaded not guilty to charges that could see them spend decades in prison, are challenging a decision by the US Treasury Department. His defense team says Washington briefly authorized Venezuelan's government to pay his legal fees under an exception to sanctions, then revoked that permission hours later. A move they say undercuts his constitutional right to counsel under the Sixth Amendment and merits dismissal of the case. Prosecutors allege Maduro abused his power to assist drug traffickers during his long rule in Caracas. The US Attorney's Office has not yet publicly responded to the motion. A visually impaired refugee from Myanmar, Nurul Amin Shah Alam, was found dead 5 days after being dropped off by US Border Patrol agents at a Tim Hortons in Buffalo, New York. Shah Alam, who arrived in the US in December 2024 with his family, was let go by Border Patrol after being cleared of deportation. His family, who expected him to be released from jail, began searching for him after being informed of the drop-off. The 56-year-old's body was found near a hockey arena, several kilometres from the drop-off location. Authorities have launched an investigation, with local officials blaming the decision to leave him alone in an unfamiliar location as a dereliction of duty. US Border Patrol defended its actions, stating Shah Alam accepted a courtesy ride to a safe location. Now joining us live, we have Noor Aziza, who is a member of the Rohingya Maya Fuino Network, for joining us from Sydney. Noor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, first question to you, Noor. ICE has long been at scrutiny for the way at which it detains its migrants. Did federal agents meet their duty of care in this case?
No, they did not meet their duty of care. Let me be clear, Nurul Amin Shah Alam is a Rohingya refugee and a genocide survivor. So we need to name it. He is a Rohingya from Burma, Myanmar, and he escaped the genocide, the military regime in Myanmar and lived as a refugee in Malaysia for a really long time and was visually impaired and was not protected. He's lived a very tough life, and his family and himself were resettled to America in 2024, at the end of 2024, which means he's only lived a life of a year and a half in some form of freedom. And this man was visually impaired. He lacked the means to navigate his surroundings. He spoke zero English and he was dropped off 5 miles away from his house. Lawyers were not called. His family was not called. They were worried. My community on the ground were looking for him, putting posters in the Buffalo, looking and calling that he was missing and to look for him. The fact that his body was found the way it was 5 days later is just a disgrace and is not acceptable.
Noor, the victim, Mr. Shah Alam, had arrived in the United States in late 2024 with his family, seeking refugee status after years working abroad. Does this case highlight broader systemic gaps in how asylum seekers are treated after detention?
It is a complete abandonment to human rights. It lacked any humane protection. He was picked up from his shop that was shut down by the US Border Patrol without calling his family, without calling any lawyers, knowing that he was blind. And he spoke zero English. And he was detained and then he was let go. And the way he was treated was abandonment. And we are completely appalled by this as a community. And for him to suffer in such a way is for such a long time of his life to only end up being in the cold in so-called freedom country where we thought he would be free and that his family would be free, and he was left behind all alone.
And what more can you tell us about the status of Rohingya refugees in the United States? How are they getting treated? Have you spoken to any living there in your work as part of the network?
Yes, some of the women in my organization live in the United States. The largest Rohingya diaspora is in Milwaukee and Chicago, and we have Rohingya living in Buffalo in Texas, and we also have diaspora in Australia and other parts of the world. Rohingya, a persecuted ethnic group from Myanmar, Burma. The UN has said we are the most persecuted people in the entire world. We are facing genocide for more than 84 years. We rely on resettlement to rebuild our life after fleeing the horror in Myanmar, Burma. The life that we expect to live in these resettled countries is to rebuild and to live happily with our families. And unfortunately, the US is not resettling Rohingya refugees anymore. There was a pledge during the Global Refugee Forum to resettle 10,000 Rohingya refugees per year in the next 10 years, but that has gone down to 0 now. So we rely on third countries to give us some form of peace, to give us some life to the most persecuted people in the entire world.
Now, Noor, just one more question, if you don't mind. His death is currently being investigated as a homicide. So what changes would you and the broader Rohingya community abroad would like to see? What accountability would you like to see in this situation for Mr. Shah Alam's death?
The officers that let him go at the coffee shop need to be held accountable. Who were they? Because he was clearly visually impaired, and you can see that by looking at just one picture of him. To let him go in a coffee shop by himself without contacting anyone is inviting him to die and knowing that he will die. He was left around roaming for 5 days. He was in the cold. It's -degrees right now in Buffalo. It's snowing and there is an emergency. So how can we just let this man go, and how can we let these officers go without any accountability? As a community, we would like to know who these officers were and make sure that they are held accountable in court and justice is served to this man and his family.
Noor Aziza, thank you so much for joining us today and coming on our show. Now moving to our next story, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney will arrive in Mumbai for his first official visit to India, scheduled from the 27th February to the 2nd of March. Reports suggest this 4-day trip marks an important step in rebuilding ties between the two countries. According to reports, Carney's visits aim to strengthen bilateral relations by focusing on key sectors such as defence, energy and artificial intelligence. The two leaders last met in November 2025 during the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, where they reviewed the progress of the India-Canada partnership. The discussions focused on evaluating bilateral relations and exploring further areas in cooperation. And that's all that we have time for. Please keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.